Hello and welcome to the heart of London on this momentous day, the coronation of Their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla. The flags are out and, for now at least, so's the sun, for a day of history in the making. You can expect dazzling scenes, elaborate ceremony and full throttle celebration. Stay with us and don't miss a moment as this unique day unfolds. We are very glad indeed that you've joined us to be part of the millions around the UK, the Commonwealth, the entire world, set to witness this historic spectacle. King Charles III will be the 40th monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey, a royal tradition that records show dates back to the coronation there of William the Conqueror in 1066. And we're starting early because, frankly, there's quite a lot to fit in. Since just after sunrise this morning, thousands of members of His Majesty's Armed Forces have been arriving onto the platforms of Waterloo Station. In fact, the last train bringing the troops has just pulled in. They're here in all their spit and polish glory to form the largest military parade Britain will have seen in 70 years, an important part of the coronation procession. And in anticipation of what's to come, some people are up and out early to bag their spot. Here they are on the processional route. The great west doors of the Abbey are, we believe, opening now. Over 2,000 people are invited as guests, and some of those select few have already begun arriving. So let's join Hugh Edwards to find out more.
Kirsty, yes, a very good morning. And the doors are open. The Dean of Westminster, Dr. David Hoyle, stepping out into what is still sunshine at Westminster. Let's hope it continues. And today promises to be every bit as memorable for the Dean and for everyone involved as the last time a coronation was held here at Westminster Abbey 70 years ago in all its majesty and all its splendour. But with one huge difference: the day's events will be seen around the world not by millions, but by billions of people. And we're all invited to witness the start of a new chapter in the story of these ancient islands, a rather modern appendage to the Abbey there today, just in case there's a spot of rain. Inside, of course, we reflect on the fact that for 1,000 years, kings and queens have been crowned at Westminster. But today the people in the Abbey and all of us watching will expect a ceremony that certainly blends the ancient with the modern, because it has to reflect the rich diversity of today's United Kingdom and the Commonwealth of Nations. We can all of us admire the architectural wonder of the Abbey, but it also offers a long pageant of British history. And today it serves as the grandest of theatres. Look at that. The great golden expanse of the carpet, and then the wonderful medieval cosmati pavement, which is unveiled in all its glory. This is where the coronation will take place. And the focal point, the chair of St. Edward, first used 700 years ago. This is where King Charles III will be crowned later today. The chair itself, of course, sitting on the Stone of Destiny, which was brought back from Scotland just a few days ago. And behind the chair, a pair of thrones where the newly crowned King and Queen will be seated. And all of these events, by the way, accompanied by a range of music quite unlike any that's been heard at previous coronations. Some of it specially composed, some of it powerfully traditional and familiar. All of it approved by the King himself, a great enthusiast for all kinds of music, especially classical music. So, with the Abbey doors now open, the early arrivals slowly making their way into the nave and choir beyond. The rain's still holding off, so let's hope that canopy won't be needed. We're all looking forward to a day that will live long in the memory.
We are. Exquisite scenes. And as I mentioned, one of the spectacles that we'll witness today is an impressive and extensive military procession. The troops who make up that procession arrived in the capital by train and are currently making their way across Westminster Bridge. And JJ Chalmers is with Captain Chris Lewis.
Yes, you can see and probably hear down here at Wellington Barracks, several thousand troops have already arrived here. And Captain Lewis, as a man who is absolutely integral to the planning of this event, talk to me about the trains to begin with. What did you think when that idea was floated?
Well, we practiced a little bit on the Jubilee last year when we moved quite a few of the troops supporting the event by train. And what it means for the troops is they can arrive a little bit later in the day, a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, and hopefully give a better show on the day.
Talk to me about the numbers today. We're talking about thousands of troops, not just on parade, but supporting this across the country as well.
Yeah, so there's over 9,000 troops involved. At least 7,000 of those will be on parade, so there's thousands and thousands that are helping support it just in London today. And the build-up over the last few weeks, many, many thousands more.
You seem awfully calm. How are you feeling? I'm sure, you know, all of this, they're just numbers on a spreadsheet to you, but how does it feel now actually seeing it in the flesh?
Well, it's amazing to see the scale of it, but a lot of this are people I know personally, so a lot of my friends are on parade today, working behind the scenes myself, planning it and executing it in the ops room. Yeah, it's an impressive sight, and actually it's calm today because we practiced so much over the last few weeks.
What we are going to see today in terms of pageantry parading, you know, the very best in the world at doing this, but a little reminder as well that this is not the day job of many of those that we'll see on parade today.
No, not at all. I mean, every soldier in the British Army, if they're doing a ceremonial role, they're absolutely operational soldiers. They rotate through ceremonial things temporarily and then straight back to normal soldiering. And I think that's what makes British ceremonial quite special, because every soldier is a true soldier, not just there for show.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure you need to get back to the planning office, so I'll let you run off.
Thank you very much.
Now, I'm pleased to be joined bright and early on this Coronation Day by two people who know their Majesties, Giles Brandreth and Craig Revel-Horwood. Thank you both for getting up so early and coming into the studio. Giles, you know both the King and the Queen. You're going along to the ceremony today. Just personally, how do you feel?
Well, for me, it's sort of two levels. The first level is if you are British, if you love history, this is an extraordinary day to be going into Westminster Abbey, which is a building that almost tells our island story. We've told the national story often through our kings and queens, and every sovereign since William the Conqueror in 1066 has been crowned in Westminster Abbey. And it tells our story beyond that. Chaucer is buried there. William Shakespeare is commemorated there. P.G. Wodehouse is remembered in Westminster Abbey. It is the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, and it's the world in a way, in a microcosm, in this one extraordinary church. So that's, for me, what is so exciting. And at another level, of course, there are the King and the Queen. This is the first crowning of a King and a Queen since 1937. So that's very special indeed. Because I think actually they're very special people. So it's a combination of history and remarkable personalities.
Craig, you've developed a friendship with Her Majesty through, I mean, two things really. She absolutely loves Strictly. I mean,
she
really
does.
loves Strictly.
Yeah.
She's a proper fan. And also your shared charity interests, osteoporosis being one of your shared charity interests.
Yes.
So give me an impression of the woman you know.
Well, I was really nervous when I first met her because I didn't know all the pomp and circumstance. I didn't know whether I should bow, curtsy. Should I say, "Hi, Camilla, darling," you know, kiss, kiss, kiss. And in fact, that's what I did. I was so nervous. I went, "Oh, hi, Camilla." And I sort of got used to doing that. But now that she's Queen Camilla, it's I guess I'll have to say Your Majesty, won't I?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. But she's a really beautiful person. I noticed her humanity. And what I loved about her was the fact that she was prepared to just muck in and do stuff. You know, I work closely with her on the Royal Osteoporosis Society to tell people about bone health and all of that. And
of course, her mother died of osteoporosis.
Yes,
it's very
exactly.
Dear to her heart.
Yeah, well, she's president of the charity. And of course, she said she wanted to have a little dance. So I said, well, let's do the gentle foxtrot, slow foxtrots, keep it social. You know,
when was this? Where was this?
This was when we were on one of the charity gigs. This is when I first met her.
Right.
And she said, oh, no, I'd like to do a chant. So off we went, darling. And then it hit national press. Not even that. My mum and dad were sat at home in Australia, in Ballarat, and they said, "You're dancing with Camilla." I said, "I know, mad, isn't it?" So, I mean, it went worldwide, but it was great for our charity, and that's what we sort of want to do. So we've formed a really unique friendship in that way, you know, ever since.
And she appeared on a Strictly Christmas special, Dancing with You.
I took her around, to introduce her to everybody. Brucey was most upset because he wanted to do it.
I bet he did. I bet he did.
But I did take her on, introduced her to all the cameramen, to everybody, and then we were sat there, and she said, we had to judge something. She said, "Is that worth a 10? I said, "No, darling." I said, 9. So then we held up 9. She's beautiful, though. She has a great sense of humour, and she's really human. You know, that's what I love about her, and she's lived a life. You know, she hasn't been living in a gilded cage in that way. You know, she's had to live her life. And I think it's really fantastic that she is becoming Queen Camilla.
I think lived a life. That's a really interesting and important difference from the coronation in 1953, when we saw this young woman who was only in the beginning, sort of budding of her existence as a young mother.
Elizabeth II became Queen aged only 25.
And so we're looking...
We have a couple now. The King will be 75 in November. The Queen is already 75, 76, I think, in this summer, starting on a new life. And this is a remarkable occasion, really, because it's both a big state occasion, an international occasion, and a family occasion. And there will be children and stepchildren and step-grandchildren taking part in the ceremony. It represents the world as it now is. And I think that's marvellous too.
It's a very interesting choice, I think, for them to incorporate. I mean, I hate the phrase blended family, but there are a lot of us about, and that is the reality of modern Britain. Yeah. And the idea that they've decided to actively incorporate these people, not just have them sitting there watching grandma or auntie, but actually have them at the centre of the ceremony. And that's
true of the ceremonial as well. Yes. This is going to be the most inclusive, international, including coronation that there has been in our whole history. And the faith is central to the King. I mean, I think the Queen will be quite nerve-wracked today. They both will be. But I think for him, this is a very special, important day. And to be doing it in this big, inclusive way is fantastic.
Craig, you mentioned your mum and dad watching back in Ballarat.
Yes.
I've been to Ballarat, actually. Your mum met Camilla, is that right?
Yes. Well, we went to a tea dance, a social sort of tea dance, and that was for osteoporosis as well. And I took my mum, because she was over at the time. And I sat mum down. She said, "Oh, do you think I'll be able to meet Camilla?" And I said, "I'm sure she'll come and say hi." Well, they sat down, they were gas-bagging for literally 15 minutes. They got on like a house on fire. So Mum went home with this story that she tells everyone at dinner parties. You know, they really got on so well. They had so much to talk about, I think, because they have so much in common.
Well, we really appreciate you both coming for your insider reflections and thoughts. That was really interesting. Thanks both very much. Well, the congregation of Westminster Abbey is by no means the only group of people that are gathering to celebrate the coronation. Anita Rani is with some others who've made the journey to London to witness today's historic events for themselves.
Thank you, Kirsty. I am down on the Mall, the iconic run-up to Buckingham Palace, where people have been gathering for 24 hours, some of them camping. The atmosphere is calm at the moment, very peaceful, very joyful. And the most important information, the weather is holding off for now. I'm joined by June Chapman, who didn't camp overnight, who is the owner of the Yalding Post Office. Now, the King and Queen paid you a visit 10 years ago after your business was devastated by the floods. Tell us about that.
Well, they had an impromptu visit, so it was a really nice surprise for the whole of the village, and they spoke to everyone whose businesses were devastated by the floods.
Were you expecting them? You say an impromptu. Was it a surprise?
It was a lovely surprise, yes, and they were naughty.
What do you mean? What did they do?
Well, they came down the hill, and they were supposed to get out the car and come into the main church to meet everybody. They got out the car, and then they turned right and spoke to all the children from Yalding School.
Oh, that's very nice. Did you speak to them?
Well, when they came into the church, that's where we were.
And what did you talk to them about?
My very fat dog that cannot swim. And, of course, we were flooded and he had a life jacket.
And did they fit in? Did they seem like locals down in Yalding?
Oh, yes. I'm sure if they bought a house in Yalding, they'd be more than welcome and they would fit right in. Yes.
Perfect. Tell me more about the dog. Tell us about your dog. What was the dog's name?
The dog was Charlie, and he was a little round pug. And yes, he survived because he had a life jacket, and he's no longer with us, I'm afraid. But I now have another little fat dog. It's a puggle, and she wears it now.
And it must have been so important for them to come and pay you a visit after you'd had that horrendous time.
It really lifted everybody's spirits, yes. No, and memorable. I mean, it's 10 years on, and, you know, we still talk about it now.
And here we are to enjoy this wonderful celebration tune. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you to you. I'm delighted to welcome my next guest this morning. We have the Commonwealth Secretary-General, Patricia Scotland, and the eminent historian and broadcaster, David Olusoga. Thank you both very much for taking the time to join us. The first thing I want to ask you, is this the first time at 7:45 in the morning you've been wearing a hat and pearls?
I think it is.
Obviously, you're going to be a guest today. What are your thoughts and feelings on, on being a witness to history?
I think it's the most extraordinary moment. I mean, 70 years we have waited for the new coronation, and it's palpable, the excitement that everyone has, and the welcome there is, because there was all the sadness and the distress of Her Majesty, the Queen, and her funeral. And now look, the country can celebrate the new era, and I think it's an amazing moment.
David Olusoga, this is a sort of meat and drink to a historian, to somebody like you, to actually sit and watch it happen in front of our eyes. What are your thoughts this morning before everything starts to happen?
Well, it's 70 years since the last coronation. The country has changed enormously, but this ceremony hasn't. And the funeral of monarchs, royal weddings, jubilees are relatively modern. What we see today is something which is truly ancient. We see a ceremony that is more than 1,000 years old, that has been held consistently in the same building since 1066. We rarely encounter the truly ancient in the modern world, and that's what's going to happen today.
And what do you think? I mean, I hope this isn't an unfair question, but what do you think people watching, will make of that?
I think we'll be surprised. This is a mixture of different elements of British history and in English history going back to at least the 9th century. There are religious elements, there are legal elements, there are ceremonial elements. I think the religiosity will come as a surprise to some people. I think just how ceremonial, the anointing, things like that, I think will surprise some people. This is a relic of an ancient world which is taking place right now in the 21st century, and I think it will surprise many people.
Patricia Scotland, we talk, obviously you have a very strong connection with the Commonwealth. We are going to see an involvement. We've seen the sort of Commonwealth flags along with the Union flags along the Mall, that wonderful view as we came on air this morning. Where does the Commonwealth sit? And for a lot of people, I'm afraid they sort of think, the Commonwealth, remind me, what is that again?
Well, I think the Commonwealth has probably never been more vibrant, because as you know, Kirsty, we've now got 56 countries.
Yes.
And that's the largest number we've ever had.
People really want to join the Commonwealth, which is interesting.
And 2 new countries who were never part of the British Empire, Togo and Gabon, part of a French history, have come to join our history because of the vibrancy, because of the values, all the things the Commonwealth stands for. The fact that we come together for public good. And yesterday, all our leaders came for this fantastic leaders' meeting. And the union that was there between them, the determination to face the world's problems together. We've got 2.5 billion people in our Commonwealth. 60% of them are under the age of 30, and they come from all regions of the world. And that opportunity to come together, to share what's good in the world, to be positive, to bring hope, we really need it at the moment, and it's a beacon. So the happiness yesterday of all the leaders was absolutely amazing.
Professor Olusoga, you've done a lot of very, fascinating and extensive work about the treatment of specifically Commonwealth soldiers and their lack of recognition, indeed the writing out of their history. And you've righted a lot of those wrongs. How do you view now, in 2023, the involvement of Commonwealth troops today and the sort of the patina, the shape of the Commonwealth?
Well, at the last coronation, there was an imperial presence. The last queen became queen of what was still an empire. This transformation into a Commonwealth and this representation today is a very unlikely next chapter in the story of the empire. I don't think anyone sitting here in 1953 could have imagined this new relationship, this new set of relationships that we have today. The presence of the soldiers from the Commonwealth, I think, as you say, it is about recognising a history that was, I'm very sad to say, quite deliberately erased for many years, and it's wonderful to see, not just here but at the Cenotaph, to see the Commonwealth recognised as a partner in those great conflicts of the 20th century.
So that's very interesting to me. You sound optimistic. You feel optimistic about the involvement of the Commonwealth and the relationship that Britain has with these countries, these places, these people that has not always been so honourable?
Well, historians like myself are very often write off the Commonwealth, and I think it's proved to be a very sort of dangerous thing to do, to presume that the Commonwealth Day is done. There's lots of problems with the Commonwealth, there's lots of debates about its role, but people who've declared its death have usually found themselves having to retract their words.
That was a wry laugh from you in the corner there. Don't write off the Commonwealth. And what are you particularly looking forward to today? I mean, the fact that you have got the golden ticket, you're one of the 2,200 people who'll be in the Abbey today. What are you especially looking forward to seeing?
I think what I'm looking forward to is watching the Commonwealth family, and they really are a family who desperately care about each other and love each other, coming to celebrate the head of the Commonwealth being crowned. It's a great moment for them. They chose His Majesty the King to be the next head of the Commonwealth. It's not a hereditary position. No. They could have chosen anyone, but they chose him because of the dedication that he has had for his whole life. So it's very wonderful for all of us as the Commonwealth family to come together and celebrate the change. And I'm so glad, David, that you recognise that the Commonwealth is not dead and has never been more vibrant. And I think we've got a great future and a great head.
Well, a very vibrant day, a very vibrant start to it. We wish you a wonderful ceremony. I hope you really enjoy it. David, we'll be talking to you later. Thanks for joining us so far this morning. Let me just take you through then the official sequence of events for the day. So as we know, a few minutes ago, the doors of the Abbey were opened and the first guests have begun arriving. If you would like the details of the order of service for Westminster Abbey, you can scan the QR code. It's up on your screen right now, or visit bbc.co.uk Coronation Service. The military will be on the processional route just after 9. At around about 9:10, we'll see the military street liners. They do exactly what they say on the tin. They will be taking up their position. Right about 10:20, we'll see the King and Queen Consort as they set off from Buckingham Palace in time for the coronation service to begin at Westminster Abbey, and that, of course, is at 11 o'clock. The service will then be followed by what's expected to be really a truly spectacular parade, including military from across the UK and Commonwealth, with the King and Queen travelling back to the palace in that extraordinarily elaborate gold state coach, and, of course, other members of the royal family joining their majesties in carriages in that procession. And we're expecting celebrations to conclude with a balcony appearance by the newly crowned King and Queen, and that will be marked, weather permitting, by a military flypast. So plenty to enjoy, and a few different ways to do it. You can watch the coronation live in ultra-high definition on BBC iPlayer. If the TV you're watching has that facility, just press the red button to watch that now. Our coronation coverage is also the BBC's most accessible live event ever. If you're blind or partially sighted, there is accessible commentary on the red button and a signed version on BBC Two. And if you'd like to watch events uninterrupted and commentary-free, we won't take it personally, please just head to the iPlayer. In addition to the wonderful live events this morning, we have collected tributes and insights from people that know and have worked with the King. Our first comes from two British icons.
I was born in 1940, so growing up in Wales, it was King George and Queen Elizabeth. When I was 12 years old, I had tuberculosis. I was bedridden for 2 years. My mother and father got me a television set to keep me happy. It was the only one in the street, and I saw the coronation. The Queen being crowned was tremendous. So this would be the second one for me.
Coming from a working class background, born in a council house, watching the coronation, the trooping of the colour rather, and I was sitting in the mall watching the procession go past when Charles was a young man. He was about 6. It's quite astonishing that you one day would meet the future King of England.
King Charles, to me, is, first of all, a wonderful person. I got to know him as the Prince of Wales. I think he's been trained for it. I think he's well equipped to be king.
You know, I hope it's a long reign for him. He's waited a long time to become king. He gave me my Companion of Honor last year, which was lovely. It's surreal to me.
One thing I love about the King is his sense of humor, because I think that's very important in life, to have a sense of humor.
He's helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And it's just so important to give young people hope because they're our future. And I think the King has always done this. I really admire him for that.
He is genuinely interested in what happens to these people. It's a passion with him. He was a great Prince of Wales, now he's going to be a great king because of his passion.
Something that you match. Thank you very much to both of those eminent people. Joining us now is also the Daily Mail writer Robert Hardman, author too. David's still with us. Just as you were sitting down and the mic was getting clipped on, I said, it really is a very special day, isn't it? It's very important to try to communicate to people who are watching on television just the sort of spangle, and there's a degree of tension in the air as well.
There is. I mean, we gather here periodically for these wonderful sort of royal events that come along, but you've got to be over 80 to remember the last coronation. There's something absolutely unique. There is a sort of magic to it. And it is what I think, I've just noticed that the crowds who camp out, sometimes they camp out for a day or two in advance of these things. Some people have been there for most of the week.
Yes, they have. David, it's interesting also from the point of view of, we don't need today in terms of our, constitutionally, we have a monarch, he is in place, he is doing the job of a king. The importance of ritual, the importance of people gathering, where do you put that?
Well, I think ceremony, almost by definition, is not necessary. It's utilitarian. There's no legal reason why the coronation is needed. The only legal aspect of it is the taking of the oath, which, of course, doesn't have to take place within the context of a coronation. I think that immense power of something that is so ancient, that has taken place for more than 1,000 years, in the same building where William the Conqueror was crowned, probably Harold Godwinson as well, the last of the Saxon kings. That sheer weight of history is something that I think we're not quite used to. We're used to traditions that are much more invented. This is, as I've said earlier, absolutely ancient.
That's a really interesting point because, of course, some people might say, Robert Hardman, that one of the successes of modern British monarchy is its ability to reinvent itself. But today, this is something different. We are really watching our monarch reach into the past and sort of almost touch hands with his forefathers.
Oh, beyond his forefathers. I mean, there are elements of today's service that go back to the Old Testament. I mean, the idea of anointing. I mean, it's way older than this building behind us, or even the monarchy or the Church of England or anything. It does touch the past, but it's that fusion of past and present. It's that fusion of constitution and faith. I mean, it's underlying it. It's an overtly, religious affair, but it's an affirmation also of the values, I think, that sort of bind us together. I mean, if monarchy stands for anything, it's sort of continuity, stability, and it's one of those from time to time. It's just sort of it's very important, I think, for a country just to sort of say, this is what we stand for, as through our leader.
What about that, David Olusoga, the hereditary principle? For some people, it's something that they are extremely uncomfortable with, and they find it unpleasant. Where do you think our sort of levels of acceptance of it sit? That we will watch today somebody who was born to the job?
I think today would be more of a test of people's tolerance for the hereditary principle than the funeral of the late Queen.
Yes.
Partly because I think the religiosity, some of the terminology within the oaths, I think some people would be very uncomfortable with. And I think there has always been this debate. Coronations in the past, appeals have been made to widen support for the monarchy. We know that support is much stronger among the old and much weaker among the young. And for many people, this will not be something that represents them or the country. We need to recognise that.
Yes, it's interesting, Robert Hardman. I was looking at, obviously, our newspapers have been full of these surveys of, a certain percentage of young people find no affiliation or any strength of feeling about the monarchy at all. And I was wondering what you make of that. Do you think, I'm wondering if it's a bit like, I don't know, gardening or Radio 4. Do people come to the monarchy, or is it simply that we are seeing a sea change? We're seeing an uncoupling of people and their understanding of their own national identity from the monarchy?
I think young people are clearly less interested. I don't know whether that means that long term they're going to be more anti it. I mean, there is, of course, there's something fundamentally irrational about monarchy. I mean, you would never, if you were starting a new nation tomorrow, you wouldn't say, we've got to find one family and give them everything in perpetuity. It just wouldn't happen. Sure. It's how we've evolved. And I think when people sort of come to understand that and come to see how it actually does have this sort of, you know, because the monarch's in charge of the armed forces and the judiciary and the civil service and all these things, it does stop other people interfering with those things. So people do, I think, when they get older, they begin to see the upsides. And I think it is hard to, in some ways, to explain a coronation, except that you know, every head of state has some sort of inauguration. They do them in different ways. Other monarchies do coronations. I mean, all the Scandinavian monarchies do one. I mean, in Holland, the crown just sort of sits on a cushion. It's rather like it's a very sort of austere, almost like a registry office wedding. Whereas we're having the full thing with the cakes and the bridesmaids and everything else. This is sort of, you know, the coronation plus.
David, what are you looking forward to today as a historian, as somebody with a professional interest?
I think every coronation that we know about is a combination of the ancient and new inventions. These are creative acts.
Yes.
Every coronation that's been recorded, there were new elements that are brought in, old elements removed or suppressed. And I think we're going to see exactly that. And we're going to see an attempt to mix the ancient with the modern to try to reflect Britain in a way that it's quite difficult with a 1,000-year-old ceremony.
Okay. For now, both of you, thank you so much for joining us. Well, Westminster Abbey is steadily filling with guests. Let's hear a bit more from Hugh Edwards.
A lot has been said, Kirsty, about the changes introduced since the coronation of 1953. The most striking change is probably the nature of the people that we can see here in the nave, the congregation, because it is in fact radically different to the world of 70 years ago. Hundreds of people drawn from charities and causes supported by the King and Queen. A vast array of them representing the theatre and all branches of culture. There's Stephen Fry, who's a good friend of Prince Charles as he was and now the King. They share a love of literature and a drive to improve literacy. And Stephen Fry is just one of those people representing the sectors that the King and Queen are giving their strong support to. Just coming in is Dame Tanni Grey-Thompson, the Paralympian, who is of course one of the very prominent campaigners for more equality in sport. Kelly Jones just coming in ahead of Tanni, the stereophonic singer who actually benefited early in his career from the Prince's Trust, and there are lots of people here from the Prince's Trust, which was set up back in 1976 by the Prince of Wales, as he then was, and has benefited millions of people in everything that it's tried to do in terms of support. If we look beyond the organ screen, and now here we are in the glorious theatre of the coronation, let's just explain a little, because in the opening minutes of the service at 11 o'clock, the King will be at the chairs of estate there on the left-hand side of the screen, the Queen on his left, and he will be taking an oath. There will be a senior member of the Chapel Royal Choir. I say senior, he's just 14, and he will come along representing the youth of today and the adults of tomorrow. And the King will pledge himself to the youth of today to serve the people. He's not here to be served, he'll say, he's come here to serve. And Charles will be the 40th reigning monarch to be anointed and crowned here. And just a quick word about the remarkable treasures on display. Some of them not here yet because they'll be carried in procession, where you see the blank spaces. But look, the Abbey Plate, as it's called, the treasure of Westminster Abbey, is already on display, and there'll be treasures from the crown jewels too, brought from the Tower of London. They'll be carried here in procession. The regalia that will be used during the ceremony of coronation itself, including, we caught a quick glimpse of it there, well, you may have seen, there it is, that magnificent golden eagle, the ampulla and the spoon. We'll take a better look at it later on, but there you have it, there you have it. That's full of oil. That's full of oil that's been gathered in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, and that's the oil that will be used to anoint the King. all of that coming a little later on.
Thanks, Hugh. Now, in perfect position to catch some of those guests as they head into the Abbey is Sophie Rayworth. Let's join her there now.
Well, the guests are streaming into the Abbey now, and I'm joined by one of them who has just arrived, Tony Juniper, who is Chair of Natural England, environmentalist, and also who knows the King very well. You've authored 3 books with him, haven't you?
Yes, we've worked together on 3 different books over the years. One called Harmony, which is really a pulling together of all of his ideas on lots of different subjects, including environmental questions, food security, water, the economy, education and architecture, and pulling it all together. And that for me was an incredible experience to understand the linkages that exist in his understanding of all these different questions, because sometimes it looks a bit random, doing agriculture in the morning and architecture in the afternoon. If you look at that book, you can see the threads that he's drawn between them, and it's a very compelling piece of work that I was delighted to help him with.
And you've described him, haven't you, as possibly the most significant environmentalist of our time.
Yes, and you know, you look at what he's been doing. His first environmental speech was back in 1968. This is more than five decades ago. And since then, he's visited the subject of climate change in depth. He's set up initiatives to halt deforestation. He's helped the journey towards sustainable fisheries. He's made the case for a sustainable circular economy. And it's really something that has developed in depth and impact over those many years. And he's a real expert on these subjects. He's not just picking stuff up and thinking that's a good idea. He thinks very hard and deeply about it to form his own views.
You've spent a lot of time with him. What do you think it will mean to him this day?
Well, his entire life has been devoted to public service, and this is just another big step on that huge journey. And so he will put himself into this role in the same way, with the same energy and dedication and commitment to the public good that he did as Prince of Wales.
And what about you? What does it mean to you to be standing here?
Oh, it's
a few hours to go yet?
It's incredible. I was just reflecting this morning. I'm 63 years old this year, and nothing like this has occurred in this country during my entire life. So to be a part of this today is absolutely incredible. The one small regret I have is looking at these incredible processions going on along the streets, and I'll be inside, of course, so we'll miss that bit. But I'll be certainly watching the BBC on the iPlayer this evening to pick it all up.
And I think they may have some screens in there for you too.
Fantastic.
You will be able to appreciate the whole thing.
It'd be a shame to miss that.
Tony Juniper, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Yeah, 7 p.m. tonight for all the highlights. Don't miss it. Joining me in the studio now is someone who has known the King literally all her life, his goddaughter, India Hicks. A special day for you because this is very personal. Can you describe the man that you know? Who is the King?
Well, I think what's very reassuring is from the insight that I've seen of him as a godfather, and a very considerate one, very similar to the public man. The private and the public man seem very similar.
Right.
Incredibly considerate from the moment he came to my christening, all the way through to confirmation, writing me messages every year, and never forgets birthday or Christmas. At my wedding, sent me a lovely long letter. Just someone who takes the time and really thinks about what he's giving. I've had the most remarkable gifts all my life from him. Once a beautiful bracelet with an I and an H entwined that he had designed, a clock for my christening with the date engraved onto it. Brilliantly, every year as a child, and slightly mysteriously when you're 8, you get a gravy dish or a teacup.
What?
A gravy dish teacup. Of course, now as an adult, I have a complete set of fine china dining. And can you imagine, I mean, most of the presents you're given as a godchild, or you give to a godchild, are, you know, a piece of plastic that's totally immaterial later. Now I have a very significant thing. So it just shows that the man then was thinking in a most forward, progressive way. And I work a lot for the Prince's Trust, and I've worked very closely with the Trust now for 2 years for the Women's Supporting Women's side. And we're always realising that the foundations of that are about inclusivity, diversity and equality. And I think those founding themes are what we're going to see carry on through into this reign. So it's a great, exciting time.
That's fascinating that you had somebody as a godfather who took the time to write the long letters and design the jewellery. How much time did you actually get to spend with him? Because, you know, people that work with him will always say to me, well, he's a very, very busy man. I've worked for all sorts of people. I've worked very hard. I've never worked harder than I work for the then Prince of Wales, now King. Did you have any sort of one-to-one time with him, or much one-to-one time?
growing up,
Yes.
we were very lucky to, and very privileged to be able to holiday in the Bahamas, where I now live. And the then Prince of Wales would come. My aunt was his godmother, and so he would come and stay with the family quite often. So we would have holidays together, and there's one mortifying memory I have, very young. I must have been about 7 or 8. We went out sailing on a tiny, tiny little sunfish boat, just me and him, and we got quite far out in this beautiful lagoon, and the rudder broke.
Right.
And Prince Charles had to get out, and he had to bravely trample back across sea urchins and coral to take us back to the safety of shore. And I sat there frozen as a terrified child, not knowing, is it better that I get out and help, or should I sit inside and be good and quiet? Awful, mortifying.
And was he fun? Was he fun as a godparent? Because there are godparents who muck in. I mean, he had to muck in there. Or there are godparents who, you know, basically it's birthdays and Christmases.
Well, he was certainly patient. I found a photograph recently in a forgotten album of me placing annoying little plastic animals all over his shoulders. And in my little childish mind, this went on for hours and hours. And he patiently sat there and let me do it.
That speaks of a very, very patient person. What sort of, I mean, I of course, you're incredibly fond of him, and you are going to be, I'm sure, very nice when I ask this question, but I really want you to think, what sort of king will he be? How do you think he will change things? Because, of course, today is the turning of a page of history. This is really the moment, I suppose, when the public unites with its monarch if it chooses to do so. What sort of king do you think he'll be?
I think that's very astute, and I think quite right. It is a turning point today, and I think that what we've seen since the death of our Queen is that King Charles has not put a step wrong. Everything has been smooth. And I think that that's what we're going to see going on. Of course, what we're seeing today is so different to that 1953 coronation. My mother was there. My mother was there in 1937.
Wow.
She was there at Buckingham Palace for the King's coronation, and now for the Queen's, and what she'll be watching with great interest today's unfolding of the next bit of history. But my mother always says that in that 1953 moment when the Queen was there in the Abbey, my mother felt that she seemed so alone, very young. Obviously, it was a service mixed with romance and tragedy. No one had imagined that the king was going to die so young. Queen never thought she would inherit the throne so young. What we're seeing today is so different. We have a very confident, strong, extraordinary, remarkable man with a very strong wife beside him in their 70s. So it's completely different. He's chosen a very different date. He was not going to go for the same date as his mother. So I think we're seeing everything unfolding very differently. And if we think about it, I'm sure many guests said the same thing. You know, we have a king who was saying and doing things that we were confused about all those years ago. And now, of course, how prescient he is, how prescient he is. And we should take comfort from that here we have a man who understands about the changes and the climate that we're in today.
For now, India Hicks, thank you very much. I mean, you look so elegant and magnificent. You're going to be joining us later to talk about all the elegant and magnificent outfits that we hope we will witness today, which of course is part of the whole joy of the thing. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Well, the King once said, "I feel more than anything, it's my duty to worry about everyone and their lives in this country, to try to find a way of improving things, if I possibly can." Well, the Prince's Trust, as we were hearing, is one of the most significant ways that he's gone about doing that. We spoke to 2 of its ambassadors who've experienced and witnessed the impact of the King's charity.
The Prince's Trust was set up in 1976. He had just come out of the Royal Navy, and with his severance pay, he set the Prince's Trust up. Over 1 million young people have benefited from his good heart for taking care of young men and women who are from disadvantaged backgrounds.
I grew up in a household where the arts weren't celebrated anywhere near as much as academia. I was 16, 17. I had auditioned for the National Youth Music Theatre. There was a fee that my parents couldn't afford. When I was informed by my teacher at the time that there was this thing called the Prince's Trust, I could apply, and it had been set up for exactly this kind of thing. The Prince's Trust paid for me to join the National Youth Music Theatre. It came along and validated my dreams, validated something that even my parents couldn't see, and that the stamp of approval was coming from someone of the stature of then Prince Charles, now King Charles. And that definitely was significant to my parents.
I started in community theatre and education, so when I was asked to be a part of the Prince's Trust all those years ago, it was a very good fit for me as someone who had a deep interest in community service. I know it has changed a lot of lives, and it brings a fulfillment.
My life went on to change in ways that I could never have anticipated. It's where my passion for acting became solidified. It's actually where I went on to meet Jessica, who I eventually married. And so it was completely formative in terms of my life. The first time I actually met King Charles was when he came to see me play Henry VI at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And he was there the day that my dad was there, my dad having been someone who was very skeptical about me becoming an actor. That was a profound moment for him, and one of the greatest gifts of my life was him coming to me at the stage door, my dad, saying, "I cannot believe they allowed a black man to play the King of England, and I also cannot believe that that person is my son." And he had witnessed that with the future King of England in the audience.
King Charles III is a caring man. He is a kind man, he's a compassionate man, and he has always risen to the occasion for the people. I have every confidence that he will be an inspiration for this generation and future generations to come.
Very interesting. I'm joined now by David Lammy, MP for Tottenham in North London, and by Sally Osman, former Director of Royal Communications for the King and Queen. Welcome to you both. Thanks for taking the time. David Lammy, to you first of all. I know in your role as Culture Minister you'd come into contact with the then Prince of Wales before, but really I want to sort of move forward to, it was 2011 in Tottenham. There had been terrible summer riots, and the Prince of Wales, has to be said, like a lot of the great and the good, came to see what was happening and show their face. Take the story up from there, because it gets very interesting.
Well, look, it's just to remind everyone, the rioting had gone on for 4 days.
Yeah.
It was desperate.
Brutal.
There were, parents holding their children burnt out of their homes. People had started to lose their lives. It was desperate. At the time, all of our leaders were on holiday. David Cameron was on holiday in Italy.
Because it was August, wasn't it?
It was August. Yeah. It was August. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, was, I think, on a walking holiday. Boris Johnson, Mayor of London, was in Canada and no one could find him. And obviously, I was a local MP. It was pretty fraught and very, very frightening. And onto the phone came the Prince of Wales's, then Prince of Wales's private secretary. Prince of Wales would like to talk to you. Will you hold for the Prince of Wales? Of course I'll hold for the Prince of Wales. And he said, look, I really want to come. He started to talk about the riots that had happened 10 years earlier in Bradford and Oldham. Yeah. And the work he had done in that part of the country, and could he help? And what was wonderful is that he came back, and did he help? I mean, he brought the Prince's Trust, he brought the Prince's Foundation, he understood that you needed to bring business back in, and he came back 5 times. And the thing I always remind people is that David Cameron came once, Nick Clegg, the Prime Minister, came once, Ed Miliband, the leader of the opposition, came once. They did not come back. He kept coming back and really struck an affinity with the people.
Okay, so this is a very interesting sort of perspective that we're getting on the King here, is the idea that this is somebody, Sally Osman, you worked very closely with him, who commits to things. He really sounds, and we saw it there, listening to David Oyelowo about the Prince's Trust, he means it. He really wants to make a difference and he sees it through.
Oh, he certainly does, and he's seen things through over a very long period of time. I mean, he's a man who wants to get things done. I mean, he wants to support people in circumstances where they find themselves in trouble or whatever, but it's more about realising potential. You know, I think he found his sense of purpose through the Prince's Trust in many respects, and he wants to help others find their potential as well, and he does stick with it. But if he comes up with an idea, then he comes up with an idea that he wants to, and will launch things to kind of try and tackle things as well.
David Lammy, it's interesting, this idea of the monarchy obviously is entirely beyond and above politics. It is not about politics. Does that make a difference to have somebody who came to your constituency, who made connections with young and vulnerable people, and who wasn't another come-or-go politician?
Well, the truth is, sometimes in politics, the politicians are getting a very rough time and a lot of criticism. I saw that during the riots. In fact, in 2009, there were floods in Cumbria. Again, the politicians were being criticised. The Environment Agency was being... The Prince of Wales went there. He went back again as well. It is to say that somehow the King, the royal family, can represent the state above politics.
Yes.
Roll up your sleeves, let's get things done. They can hark back to better times. And I think that communities do respond to that in these very, very difficult moments.
It's called in the lingo, Sally Osmond, this convening power. And the King, by reputation, is very, very good at that. He's good at getting people in the room, we hear. Do you notice a difference, and you've worked across all sorts of organisations at a high level, that there is a difference that when an invitation comes from the monarch, people abandon their thoughts of their sort of party political views, and they think, well, actually, it's the monarchy and it's about something different and it's above the normal bickering and fighting?
I think that's true. I think people do. You know, it sits proudly on the mantelpiece when the invite comes through from the Lord Chamberlain's office or whatever. And I think people just want to experience something with a member of the royal family, particularly when it's the monarch. And you know, the former Prince of Wales, you used the word convening. I mean, that word ricocheted around the corridors of St James's Palace, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't disappeared now that he's installed as monarch. He will do things to still bring people together to talk about things, the things that matter, and that's his great power. He can do that as head of nation as well. I mean, David mentioned the floods. He did the same at the Somerset Levels in 2014. He'll carry on doing that. He did it with COP27.
To you both, thank you very much. Interesting insights. Really good to talk to you. Well, guests are continuing to arrive at Westminster Abbey. Let's join Sophie.
One of the guests who's just arrived is Jay Blades, community worker, furniture restorer. Very well known for the repair shop. Your role presenting that. What's it like to be here today?
I tell you what, this is amazing to be here. It's one of those things where I've been here a few times, but I've never seen the streets as empty as this, and I've never seen so many police with white gloves on. It's unreal, absolutely unreal. But no, it's special, really, really special.
And why have you got the invitation today?
I got the invitation because I am an ambassador for the Prince's Foundation, and it's all about heritage crafts and retaining those and making sure that we get the next generation to learn them and continue that craft.
Because that is something the King is very passionate about. He came on the repair shop, didn't he, last year?
Yeah, he came on the repair shop last year when he was the Prince, so it's the former Prince, and then now he's going to be made the King. But we went to Dumfries House first of all, just to see what they're doing up there, and it's unbelievable what's going on. And then gave us some items to repair. He doesn't miss a trick, so we took him to the repair shop and did those, and then he came and collected them.
That's quite a responsibility, having these items that he gave you.
Yes, no, it was a real, but luckily all I had to do was just rely on my team. So I've got a brilliant team down at the repair shop that take care of all the hard work.
And you got on very well, didn't you? I mean, there was a lot made about the fact that you touched his arm or something.
Yes. Well, the feeling is mutual. When you meet someone who has the same interest as you, basically you're going to get on. You're going to talk till the cows come home. And he touched me, I touched him, and I think there is royal protocol, but if the royal or the former prince is saying, well, I don't have a problem with it, and he touched me, it's cool, no problem.
Now, I know you're very excited about going inside the Abbey today, seeing it, and also seeing the Coronation Shed.
100%. It's a real honour to get the invite, first and foremost, and then to be in there. This is history. And there might be an opportunity to actually buy the chair that I'm sitting on as well, so I can have it within the family. So I'm hoping I sit on a chair that I can buy. Nothing too fancy, just something nice and plain and simple.
You never know. Jay Blades, lovely to see you, and thank you for talking to us.
Likewise. Thank you.
Let's join Hugh now.
Well, Jay Blades certainly will be greeted by a remarkable sight when he comes into the Abbey, because it's now filling up rapidly. People have been told to be in their seats by 9 a.m, bright and early, for a service that doesn't begin formally until 11 o'clock. But lots of familiar faces joining us now. Just tucked behind there in that rather elegant hat is Dame Judi Dench. She's just arrived a few seconds ago. Somebody from the world of acting, world of theatre and film and culture, which of course is something that the King and Queen are very enthusiastic about supporting, and Dame Judi Dench knows them both. Here we have some very distinguished musicians, including Andrew Lloyd Webber, who's composed one of the anthems in today's coronation service. He's done that in collaboration with the King. And then just to his left, our right, is Sir Carl Jenkins, who's the Welsh composer, whose version of one of the old Welsh folk tunes, Tros y Garreg, Across the Stone, will be played a little later on. A beautiful piece with the royal harpist Alice Hughes. Another little look at the high altar with its magnificent mosaic of the Last Supper. As we see, there are lots of items of regalia which are not there yet. They will be delivered by people in the great procession that will come before the ceremony starts. I mentioned the ampulla earlier, the eagle in golden form, which holds the anointed, the holy oil to anoint the king. The spoon is what I want you to look at here, because remarkably, the spoon is our link with ancient history, dating from the 12th century. And the spoon is the only item of regalia left, because all the rest of the royal regalia was destroyed by Oliver Cromwell and his men at the time of the Protectorate. So the spoon, the humble spoon, though it's in gold, is our link with ancient history today.
So let's take a look ahead to the coronation ceremony in a little more detail. I'm joined by historian and author Dr. Anna Kay, who has written extensively on the long and complex history of the crown jewels. We saw that incredible 12th century spoon. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's good just to sort of zoom out a bit and give people an overview of, it's called the regalia. These crown jewels are, am I right in saying 2 million people a year bother to go to the Tower of London to see these magnificent things? That's extraordinary.
Yeah, and actually even more than that in recent years. Yeah. I mean, the thing about the crown jewels is that sometimes people say, are they real? And I think when they say that, it's a combination of being amazed at the sort of pure kind of bejeweled splendour of them. But it's also something about their antiquity and the fact that they still exist, that they are still used in the way that they are. And when I worked at the Tower of London many years ago as a curator there, my first job was to have a little label made for the crown jewels, for the collection, which simply says, in use, that would sit where the imperial state crown was when it was being used. And I think that people, as much as loving seeing the objects themselves, also were completely spellbound by the idea that they're not museum objects.
Let's zoom in now then. First of all to the St Edward's crown, which is in itself a magnificent thing that is it true to say it'll be worn only once by King Charles?
Yes. So there are two crowns. This is the kind of thing you have to get your head around. There are two crowns. One St Edward's, which is only ever used for the act of coronation, once and once only.
Right.
And then the imperial state crown, which it gets swapped for afterwards.
So the St Edward's crown we're looking at now, and something that I also read, which I was fascinated by, is that it was the case up until, relatively recently in historical terms, that the gems were rented to put into that crown for a coronation. Not anymore, of course. That's true, is it?
Yeah, completely true. So before the discovery of diamonds in South Africa and South America, they only came from India and were in very, very short supply. And so what would happen was that for coronations and other occasional moments of great splendour, the crowns would be set with a whole lot of stones that didn't actually belong to the crown, belong to the monarchy, which would be hired, usually for a percentage of their value. So they'd look fantastic on the day, and then they'd all be popped back out of their settings and returned to their owners afterwards.
So let's take a look at the imperial state crown. So this, the first is a St Edward's crown, now is the imperial state crown, and this is the one that people, if they watch the state opening of Parliament and so on, will be familiar with. The jewels in this, which are the jewels that, I mean, they all look absolutely incredible, but in terms of the wow factor, what are the ones to really look out for?
So there's the Black Prince's Ruby, which is the really kind of standout stone visually, which is the red stone on the front of the imperial state crown, which is a wonderful thing because it has a very ancient. It's not cut or faceted in a way that we would expect now. It's uncut, and the thing is that the imperial state crown is very, very heavily jewelled. St Edward's crown, which is used for the moment of coronation, much, much less so. It's much more about the solid gold object, and it's a much older object. It was the object made for Charles II in 1660, whereas the imperial state crown is a 20th century incarnation of the state crown.
The sovereign sceptre, just one of the sceptres we will see today, and it has in it the jewel that's known as the first star of Africa. Now, this is a 530 carat diamond. Is that the largest colourless stone in the world?
Yeah, it's the largest flawless diamond in the world still today. Yeah, 530 carats, and it came from a single stone, which was several thousand carats, which was called the Cullinan diamond.
The Cullinan diamond. So that's the Cullinan one, and we will see in the newly rejigged Queen's crown, which is the Queen Mary's crown, we'll see Cullinan 2 and 3. Is that right? These new stones, is that right?
No, 2 is in the front of the imperial state crown, so it's the big diamond at the front. So 1 and 2 are in the King's regalia.
I see.
And then Queen Mary's crown, which the Queen will wear today, Queen Camilla will wear today, has been rejigged to take others of the Cullinan stones, because there are 9 Cullinan stones.
Just as well you're here to keep me quiet. And are you looking forward to seeing that? Because nobody's seen that with this.
No, it'll be really exciting. I mean, Queen Mary's crown was made in 1911, hasn't been worn since Queen Mary herself died in 1953. So seeing that set and slightly altered, because I think they're altering the number of arches on it. It was designed so the arches could be taken off, so she could wear it as just a circlet. But seeing it set today and being used again, I mean, you know, I didn't imagine probably would ever be used again.
Remarkable.
Will be a very special moment.
Real spectacle. We don't. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so we don't have time to talk about that 12th century spoon. But it's gilt. It's silver gilt, and it's inlaid with pearls, and it is spectacular. And it's the oldest part of
it's
the
the
regalia.
only object of the regalia that survived the destruction at the time of the English Revolution.
We should look out for that. Thank you so much for talking to us. So fascinating. The guests continue to arrive at Westminster Abbey. Let's join Sophie again. I could have talked.
Well, most of the guests are inside the Abbey now. I'm joined by one man who has a reserved seat, though, Lord Coe, Sebastian Coe. You are not just a guest, you're actually taking part in the coronation today. Explain your role.
Explain my role? Well, I'm actually representing the Order of Chivalry, which covers a whole group of the most extraordinary people. I'm very flattered, very honoured to be doing that, but it represents former Prime Ministers and David Attenborough and Judi Dench, people like that. So great scientists, eminent academics. So quite what I'm doing in that group, I don't know, but I'm very flattered.
But because of that, you've had to take part in rehearsals.
Yes.
What's that been like?
Well, as you can imagine, the rehearsal and today is choreographed within an inch of its life. It reminds me a lot of the Olympic opening ceremony, actually, with the sort of eye for detail. But the rehearsal was actually great fun because I had the opportunity to meet a lot of people I knew, and actually in the procession, I have Richie McCaw in front of me, the former All Black captain, who will presumably be protecting the line, and behind me, Dame Mary Peters, who was my team manager in Los Angeles and Moscow. So there are some familiar faces, and a lot of people I'd not met before who are equally
you have a better idea than most about what we're about to see today.
I do, yes.
And?
It's going to, well, I think it is going to be a lovely occasion. And actually, I think there's going to be a lot of fun as well. I mean, people even in the rehearsal, people were just so genuinely pleased and happy to be there.
Lord Coe, thank you very much. We'll let you go off to your duties.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's not just here in the UK that King Charles has made an impression. We spoke to an American icon, none other than Barbra Streisand, who reflects now on their decades of friendship.
I first met King Charles when he was Prince Charles, of course.
I was in a recording studio. It was 1974, I believe. And we got a call that Prince Charles was going to be in Los Angeles and he wanted to meet me. I thought that was so sweet. We had this big 60-piece orchestra, I remember, and we were in the control room listening to a playback of the song when he walked in. Anyway, I happened to be drinking a cup of tea to keep the vocal cords warm, you know? And he was curious about the kind of tea I was drinking. So I asked him if he wanted to taste it, and to my surprise, he took a sip. I thought it was very charming, and it made me immediately like him. So we spoke like two regular people, just getting to know each other, you know? I think that King Charles and I share a number of common interests. We're both perpetual students of art, architecture, and design, I think. And of course, we both love music. Oh, and I should thank him. I heard that he put together his favorite desert island discs. And he included Don't Rain on My Parade. So I made the King's playlist. Now, how about that? Thank you, Your Majesty. It's been an honor to know him as my friend. We met when the Prince was 24 years old, and now I'm proud to call him His Majesty, King Charles III.
Spectacular, quite a story. Let's rejoin JJ Chalmers, who is at Wellington Barracks.
Yes, today will of course be a tri-service parade, so I've got members of the junior and senior service with me. Flight Lieutenant Barella, what a moment of history to find yourself in.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts and feelings?
Very excited to be a part of it. It's a momentous occasion, and I'm thrilled to be here.
You received the new colours from the King himself that you will be flying today. I mean, that is, again, that historic moment. When you think of what those colours will go on to see, really puts things in perspective.
Yeah, it was a fantastic occasion. Been here last Thursday, got to meet His Majesty, and it was the first time the colour had been presented to the RF by the King. The first one was presented by his daughter, Princess Elizabeth, so it was a real privilege.
Wow. Petty Officer Dungy, you joined the Royal Navy because your grandfather served in it.
That's it, yeah.
What's your family thinking right now?
Yes, the family are immensely proud. Got some family on the Mall at the moment. I've got my wife, mother-in-law on the Mall at the moment. I was actually in conversation with my wife's granny last night, and she could remember watching the coronation, the Queen's coronation, way back when.
Black and white, tiny
black
TV.
Black and white, she said 9-inch TV. She was 17, she managed to get into the pub to watch it, hundreds of people watching it. And for her to now be watching me, say, grandson, now within the coronation, it's a great honour for me, for the country as well. So
phenomenal. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. I'll dismiss you, because I'm sure you've got a job to do.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Well, Charles III has a well-known passion for the arts, describing the creative side of his life as vital and another world to go through a door into. 3 star performers told us their experiences of sharing their craft with the King.
To be or not to be.
On the 400th anniversary of the death of Shakespeare in 2016, the Royal Shakespeare Company did a huge, long day of celebration of Shakespeare.
And myself and various other actors who have played Hamlet were all arguing as to how to emphasise those most famous of Hamlet's words.
Try this. To be or not to be, that is the question.
No. To be or not.
No, to be or not. It's a choice.
We were all trumped by His Royal Highness coming on stage.
Might I have a word? Might I? Do you mind? I hope you don't mind. But just a minute. Just a minute. To be or not to be, that is the question.
He had a twinkle in his eye and he had brilliant timing. And I thought, good on you, you know.
Maybe if he wasn't born into royalty, he might have been a performer. He's got a great sense of humour.
His interest in comedy is very kind of important.
because I think comedy is one of those things that is fairly spontaneous. You can't fake comedy. You know, it's something which will either work or it doesn't work.
That love of the arts runs very deep in the King, ever since his first performances at school. When he was at university at Cambridge, he became a member of the Dryden Society, and I was also in the same company.
And here I am, showing just how adaptable the sports commentator can be.
I remember crossing paths with him on the stairs as he was going up to do a performance in a sketch where he was sitting in a dustbin, and I just couldn't believe, you know, the future king was sitting in a dustbin.
Whenever we met, his default expression would be a smile. He came up to me, Kirita Kanawa was next to me on the line, and he came to me and he said, really enjoy the fish called Wanda. And he said to Kirita Kanawa, have you seen a fish called Wanda? And she said, no, not yet, but I will. And he said, chips up the nose, marvellous.
After university, King Charles continued to sort of nurture this sort of silly side, because he carried on performing with and for people in the RAF. To have that sort of very English, silly sense of humour in a king, it's quite, I find it reassuring.
To have a king where the arts are not only something that he personally has partaken in and still partakes in, but also has championed throughout his time as the Prince of Wales, it feels like a good place for our culture to have someone who's that behind what we should take a great national pride in.
I feel very fortunate to have a king that represents something of what I love, you know, somebody who I feel is as passionate about the arts as I am.
I think he values creativity very much, and I think it's his engagement with the wider world of comedy and beyond that, all the world of the creative arts, which gives me great hope for his reign ahead.
Well, I'm joined now by two very well-known actors who also happen to know the King, Sanjeev Bhaskar and David Harewood. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us. Sanjeev, to you, first of all, you were there that night when he nailed the line, didn't he? The old to be or not to be.
He did, yeah.
Tough crowd as well.
Well, a tough crowd and tough castmates. I mean, you know, all those people on stage with him are incredibly accomplished. So to kind of hold your own in that and keep your comedy timing is no mean feat. I mean, it was a real surprise to us on the evening that he was there.
Was it? So nobody knew that was happening?
No, we didn't know. But also, I mean, he did a memorable sketch once with Stephen Fry and Roger Moore, where he played a waiter on stage at a lookalikes restaurant. So he's, I think if I remember correctly, Roger Moore's last line was, I think I know who he's supposed to be, but he needs to work on his voice. So he's always been, you know, up for a laugh and as we saw from those clips, able to send himself up.
David Harewood, it's a very interesting idea that, you know, in his own words, that this is a door through which he could go that gave him access to a whole lot of things in a very structured life where there's a lot of obligation and one has to behave properly and there's certain expectations.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a release for him. And as Sanjeev said, it's really important that we have a monarch who kind of understands that aspect of what we do. And I'm sure he has an appreciation of that. I mean, the idea that, as you said, that he comes from this very structured world, to find that he can sort of release himself into sort of a world of make-believe and has a real appreciation of that, particularly the classics. He loves the classics. So I think the fact that he can has an appreciation of that is just really, really important.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the classics then, because Shakespeare, for a lot of people, quite impenetrable in many ways. And I heard it can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be. And Robert Harris, the esteemed author, said that he went once with the King and his wife to watch Shakespeare, and he said, well, let's face it, I mean, it's his EastEnders. That's what he said, which I thought was a great way of describing it. But why do you think that Shakespeare has such resonance for him and knowing it as well as you do?
Well, I know that Philip used to read poetry to him when he was younger, and so I think from a very early age he's had an appreciation of literature. But something like Shakespeare, I mean, it's such wonderful language. It's so rich, and it's such a descriptive language. And I mean, I myself kind of fell in love with it at school, so I'm sure you know he understands the value of it, particularly to young people. So I think he does really have a real appreciation and love of it.
Sanjeev, we're talking then about this page turn today, this moment when we leave behind what's happened before in monarchy and we look ahead. And I guess for people, and I got a sense of it there in that piece of tape that we were watching, that for people whose livelihood is the arts. It's an incredible thing to have a monarch who feels as strongly as they do about it, and we might see it championed more.
Absolutely. I mean, he has always championed it, and so there is nothing new from him in terms of still championing it. But also, you know, my impression from him is that he understands that, you know, the value of the arts isn't just in creating artists, but actually it impacts everything. It impacts science and engineering, because it's the creative bit of your mind that will kind of say, well, let's go to the moon. It'll be engineers that will help you get there. And I think he's always understood that. So he doesn't see it as merely leisure. You know, he sees the importance beyond that. So I think he champions the arts in that kind of perspective.
And also, just to say that, you know, coming out of obviously a very difficult pandemic, you know, the sector was really, really struggling, and a lot of people, you know, were going through some really difficult times. So to have somebody who understands that and champions it, I think is really, really important, that we have a monarch that understands the sacrifices people can make in this industry.
This idea of understanding, it's a theme that comes up again when I'm talking to people who know the King, and it's interesting from your point of view. You're involved with the Prince's Trust, and that is really about the disenfranchised. It's about people on the edges who don't feel that they can get to the centre. They don't have the money to continue in education. They're not able to start their own business because the bank might have turned them down because they don't seem like a safe bet. Why did you, I mean, I'm sure somebody, you know, who's as well known as you get asked to get involved in so many things. Why did you choose the Prince's Trust?
Well, you know, it's interesting because it kind of happened back to front for me, because I voiced a documentary on the Prince's Trust.
Oh, right.
I've spent a lot of my time in the States, so I sort of, when I was back here one time, they asked me to voice this documentary, and I was really surprised at just how many disenfranchised people were, particularly young black people, or from the inner cities, how many people spoke really, really highly and were really enthused about the Prince's Trust. So when I was given the opportunity to be an ambassador, and I turned up at one of my first events, I was just so stunned by just the looks on children's faces, the young people's faces, they're really excited to be there, and felt really energised, and I thought this is really something that has great value, and I was just very, very proud to have been made an ambassador.
Sanjeev, you've had a lot of contact with the King over the years and involved in things that he cares about. Give us an insight into his sense of humour. Has he got a good sense of? He seems like a man with a good sense of humour.
I think anybody who's, you know, as you saw from the clips, who can send himself up and love the goons, and Spike Milligan and Peter Sellers, I think would be on the right path. I think a lot of people, I think understandably to a certain extent, respond to him as the office or the position or the role as opposed to the person.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was a kid at one stage, he got into comedy, he loved comedy, he loves the arts, and at the end of the day, he's primarily, like all of us, a punter. And so that's what he enjoys watching things, he enjoys being kind of, you know, having fun.
Such a good point.
So, yeah, I think in that sense, I think if we can see beyond the office of state, I think what you see is quite a fun, nice, caring guy.
Really interesting to talk to you both. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's rejoin Anita. She's on the Mall.
Thanks, Kirsty. Down on the Mall, the crowds are gathering, the atmosphere is peaceful, joyful, there's a real sense of excitement, and there are some incredible outfits as well. People have made a real effort. I'm joined now by Bal Ahir, who is the co-founder of the Luton Sikh Soup Kitchen. Now, Bal, King Charles came to pay you a visit in December of last year, not just to see the work you're doing, the amazing work you're doing with the soup kitchen, but also to visit the newly opened Sikh temple, the Gurdwara. How special is that?
Well, probably no words to describe how special it felt. We were absolutely overwhelmed. We're a minority within a minority, and to be selected as part of the visit was just such a special experience for us.
And how long did he spend at the Gurdwara?
So he was there for 1 hour, 10 minutes, which was, again, great. He really engaged with everyone, really struck a chord, and really touched everyone that he met during the day.
And he actually went up to the prayer hall as well, didn't he?
Yes, he did go up to the prayer hall as well, and he also sat down in the prayer hall, which is a huge moment for us as a community.
Were you expecting that?
No, we weren't expecting that. So that was something really, really, really special for us.
And just what did it mean to the community that he did that and took the time to do that?
I think, as I said, it really struck a chord. It was really overwhelming, but I think the community felt quite humble. The head of state was actually joining us in this way and making this effort.
Did it give you some sort of insight into the type of king that he might be?
Yeah, absolutely, because, you know, inclusivity is quite a big topic at the moment, and it really showed where His Majesty thinks and how he believes in terms of bringing communities together and engaging in communities.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to me this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Now, King Charles's commitment and passion for the environment is very well known. Indeed, as far back as the 1970s, he was making speeches about the importance of sustainability and protecting the natural world for future generations. More than once he was criticised, even pilloried for his position. Now, however, his views are seen simply as mainstream.
We are faced at the moment with the horrifying effects of pollution in all its cancerous forms.
What I know about King Charles is how far ahead of his time he was in talking about the need to protect the environment.
There is chemical pollution discharged into rivers from factories and chemical plants.
He was way ahead of the curve. He predicted these things, and he's been fighting to prevent them for a long period of time.
There is air pollution from smoke and fumes discharged by factories and from gases pumped out by endless cars and aeroplanes.
It's impossible to look down at Earth from space and not be mesmerized by the beauty of our planet. When we listen to King Charles talking about environmental issues, it really brings home how important this is and how we all need to be thinking about it.
Conservation means being aware of the total environment that we live in.
My impression of King Charles was of a man who really cared about the natural world. He understood the need to change the way that we interact with the natural world. Charles has always wanted to make a difference.
His Majesty's voice has frankly been one of the most respected because he's not in politics. He does speak as the head of state of a great nation, and in that regard carries weight that a lot of other people don't.
I think King Charles shows a genuine interest in the science behind climate change and the kind of experiments that we're doing to find solutions to the problem, something that we're passionate about on board the space station as well.
I personally am really happy that our king is someone who cares passionately about the environment. He also cares passionately about young people and helping them to understand truly how important the environment is for our future. The environment isn't political. The environment is his own children's and grandchildren's futures.
Well, joining me now is somebody who has worked very closely with the King on one of many of his sustainable initiatives. He's also a best-selling author and one of Britain's best-loved chefs. Jamie Oliver is with us. Welcome. And it's
Morning.
Such a special day. You're wearing your gold blue Peter badge. I have just...
I'm glad you noticed. Thank you very much. Got that a couple of weeks ago.
You worked with the King first, I mean, well over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's quite obviously a passion for you. How did you recognise that it was a passion for him?
Well, I knew he was into it, and obviously I was a much younger man then. And every year from then we would go to Highgrove with the 15 students and they would learn about the concepts of organic farming, which is not using chemicals and sprays, and real farming. And it was amazing. But I think farming in general, he's an incredible supporter of. Artisans, craftsmanship, cheesemakers, butchers. I mean, the Rare Breed Survival Trust, with all, keeping diversity in the countryside is definitely one of his passions. And obviously, having watched him over the years, he's always good with all kinds of people, but I think he's always most happy with people in farming and food industry.
Yeah.
He's good fun.
Is he good fun?
Yeah, he's a good laugh. And I think obviously, you kind of got to mind your P's and Q's and be polite, but really he just wants to have fun. And everything that I've ever done, it hasn't been whimsical or just for being pretty, or it's always got purpose. It's always about congregating people to try and make the industry or the world or a particular problem within farming and food better and progress it.
Things like organic farming, indeed buying organic food, it's really expensive. For a lot of people, they think, well, that's for those and such as those. But you served school lunches together. I mean, he was on the front line with you at the much less, I know farming's not glamorous, but slightly rarefied organic farming can be seen as. But he's gone to other places with you that are sort of less likely.
He knows and understands intrinsically that farming can play a massive part in the huge procurement of food into our many 23,000 schools around the country. But more than that, he knows that good food going into kids, powers British children. You know, all the science, all the research says, you know, how educational attainment is amplified by good food.
Yeah.
And but also he's well briefed. In actual fact, he's not well briefed. It's a passion. Like he's properly knowledgeable and geeky about tiny details of all kinds of aspects of nutrition and food and breeds of animals and all kinds of things.
You spend a lot of time I mean, we all know you're great in the kitchen, but a lot of what you do these days is campaigning. You know, you give of your time. You're trying to move the dial on things that are difficult. You know, to be up against the huge industries and the sugar and all of that sort of stuff that we know about, that we worry about with our children. When the king lends his name to something that you are doing, does it make it easier?
It can do, and it often does. Obviously, you can swing it both ways, but mainly it definitely, to have his vote of approval means a lot because he's in it for the long game. And his customer is the public, as mine is really as an author. You know, that's who I always consider my boss. So a lot of the things I get into, I don't particularly want to get into, but the audience really want me to express on their behalf. And I think the country at large always feel that their voice doesn't really count. So for myself, I try and amplify their voices. And I think for the king, he's always tried to do that. But he has to be careful, right?
Yeah.
So his power, I always feel, has been to congregate people from different industries, often the enemy. I've been at dinners where you've kind of got the answers, the solutions and the problem all in one room. And I think ultimately...
Which is the only way to make change, really.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, even though he's been a massive advocate of organic farming, like he supports all farming.
Yeah.
And so he wants everything to get better. And I think that's the grown-up approach, really, if you really want to progress Britain. Actually, Britain right now is in an interesting time. You know, do we want to stack it high and sell it cheap to other countries? Well, we'll fail at that because many other countries have been good at that for a long time. So I think Britain going forward, representing quality, high standards, trust in a food chain globally that's not that trustworthy, is really interesting. So, yeah, I've always found him an incredible ally, really.
You've met the Queen too. Do they both know their way around a kitchen? Are they good cooks? Do they know what they're doing?
Prince Philip was definitely into his cooking. Right. He was very much the barbecue king, I'm led to believe, and we had a few good chats about that, hilarious chats about that. I'm not sure the Queen has time to be cooking, but I can't possibly say. But I think Camilla's probably a dab hand in the kitchen. That is my guess. I haven't got evidence, but I christened the King's first time at Clarence House. So I was when they redid it up. I was the first one in the kitchen. There was a few plumbing issues, but, you know, we got there.
Just very, very briefly, lots of people will be cooking, celebrating this weekend, making special dishes. What would be your go-to for a sort of communal dish, a picnic dish?
Well, look,
briefly, don't give me all the ingredients.
You know you're going to start me.
I know. Why did I even ask?
I did like a coronation expression of a roast chicken. Like all the spices, you know, some nice little tricks on there. You can find the recipes in all the usual places, but it's a bit late now. But obviously, we've got the weekend to celebrate.
A lot of people are having street parties tomorrow,
and
so
a
not
nice
too
bank
late.
holiday as well.
Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Thank
it's
you
so
so
nice
much.
to see you. In the next hour, the final military preparations will be made to the processional route for the King and Queen Consort. The troops that we saw arrive earlier by train will soon be visible out on the streets. The steady hand of Claire Balding will guide us through today's two processions. But first of all, we're going to join JJ Chalmers again at Wellington Barracks.
Yes, alongside the British personnel on parade today, there will be 40 Commonwealth nations and overseas territories, some 400 personnel in total, including, well, Major Mohammed, who's here from the Maldives Defence Force. Sir, how are you feeling? You're standing in history right now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, indeed. It's a great event, and I'm really honored to be here today.
What are you making of the scale of all of this?
Well, we are of 10 soldiers, 7 enlisted soldiers and 3 commissioned officers from Maldives National Defence Force representing Maldives in this historic and big event. We are truly honored to be here in this Coronation Day, participating in Coronation Day ceremonies.
How is the Maldives feeling right now?
Maldives is doing great, and especially Maldives National Defence Force is very proud to send a contingent from Maldives National Defence Force to participate in this event. And I would say Maldives National Defence Force is also very honored and proud, and overall Maldives also being a devoted member of Commonwealth family, whole Maldives is also honored and proud of this event.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you go and take your place in history, sir.
Thank you so much.
I think now we're going to find out a little bit more from Claire Balding about what lies ahead.
Kirsty, thank you so much. As we've been saying, 10,000 members of the armed forces are deployed today, whether that be in ceremonial or supporting roles, in processions, in gun salutes, in flypasts, sailors, soldiers and aviators from across the UK and the breadth of the Commonwealth will be putting on a day of military spectacle that promises to be truly awe-inspiring and breathtaking, and everything will be performed with precision in mind. Most of these military personnel have been up since 3:30 this morning. You saw them arriving by train and marching across Westminster Bridge. What a wonderful sight that was. The crowds also in position. I saw people earlier today arriving by tube and arriving by car and walking in from distances, so excited about what they will see in at Wellington Barracks. Very shortly we will see the beginning, and you can already feel the anticipation of the movement that will come. Just have a listen to the marching. These are the foot guards who will provide street lining responsibilities backstage in Wellington Barracks. And bear in mind that this is about service to the Commander-in-Chief, the King. And it will be the biggest military procession this country has seen for 70 years. In fact, as we see the coronation procession later, it will stretch for a mile in length all the way from the Mall back to Westminster Abbey. And when the troops arrive at Buckingham Palace, they will then march into the gardens, they'll form up and they'll salute the King, and that finally will be a very personal moment of recognition. And there the Queen Victoria Memorial, sparkling winged victory atop it, and you can see there Queen Victoria herself staring down the Mall. And the Mall red to symbolise a red carpet leading from Admiralty Arch up to Buckingham Palace. Now, the King and Queen Consort did not spend the night at Buckingham Palace. They very much remain in residence at Clarence House. And that is their home, whereas Buckingham Palace, with its 775 rooms and over 1,000 staff, is the office. You see there the Union flags, the flags of the Commonwealth countries as well, stretching down there. At the moment, the police providing the security between the crowds of St James in St James's Park and Green Park. Green Park on the right there, St James's on the left as we're looking at it. And you notice the crowns there that were on top of the lampposts. Everything has been specifically designed for today, even the planting of the tulips. We've got beautifully mown grass in front of Canada Gate, and the tulips that are called King's Blood, planted with timing in mind. There the crowns, and here the King's Blood tulips. So they are at their peak today. And the grandstand there to the south side of the Queen Victoria Memorial, that is full of people who've worked for the NHS, veterans as well, and those connected with charities that are held close in the heart of the King and the Queen Consort. And they have taken their seats very early, many of them wearing ponchos. There are showers forecast later today, but the likelihood of them, having just checked, is diminishing, so maybe only a 40% chance of showers. Let's keep our fingers crossed, but as we know, it won't affect the enthusiasm of all of those who are gathered to witness history. And Queen Victoria, the second longest reigning monarch, obviously the late Queen Elizabeth II being the longest of all British monarchs. Queen Victoria herself reigned for 63 years and 216 days. And she will watch the procession, or her statue will watch the procession, as it leaves Buckingham Palace at 10:20. And the King's procession makes its way down the Mall. And then obviously, on the return, the enormous coronation procession. Very soon, Kirsty, we will see Their Majesties, the King and Queen Consort, making their way from Clarence House to Buckingham Palace, but the timings on that slightly loose. We'll let you know when they appear.
Thanks so much, Claire. Well, of course, everything happens as it happens. This is a big live event, the biggest live event, and watching it with me just now, I'm watching all those magnificent pictures and the tulips standing to attention and the people in the grandstand. Do I put my rainmate on? Do I need it? Do I not? It's all live. It's all happening before us. You were enjoying the pictures specifically of the flags down the Mall.
I thought
that's because I looked at them, I thought they're Commonwealth flags, but of course Robert Hardman, historian and author, had all the details. So let's just take a little look at the Mall, which is in itself a splendid thing. And those flags that we see lying, obviously we see the Union flag, and in between them we see what, Robert?
In between them we see the flags of the realms. So these are the realms of which the king is also king, as well as Britain. He's king of 14 other nations. So they're crowning their monarch today. They're getting a new head of state today. They're spaced out according to effectively their age as independent nations. So you've got Canada and Australia at one end, and Papua New Guinea towards the other, and it's all part of the symbolism. When you go further along the procession route, if you go up, you look around Horse Guards, you'll see the flags of all the Commonwealth nations.
Yes.
And then a bit further along in Parliament Square, you'll see all the flags of all the dependent territories, those parts of the globe from Gibraltar to British Antarctic Survey, Jersey, Guernsey, they're all there. So everyone's got their flag out today. It's a very important part. It's not just Britain that's getting excited.
Why don't we just take a little return look to the Abbey? Hugh is there. Let's see who is taking their place and what's happening as time ticks away and we build up to that moment at 11 a.m.
Kindly join us at the magnificent opening of the pre-service concert, in effect. And we have the wonderful Sir John Eliot Gardiner, master of Baroque music, and more besides, with the Monteverdi Choir and the English Baroque soloists. Some of the world's leading musicians. Three pieces by Bach, particular favourite of the King's, and to finish this section there'll be a piece by Bruckner as well. They are currently singing unto the Lord, and although we won't be able to offer you every single note of the music today, because we need to explain what's going on and hopefully aid your understanding of what's happening in the ceremony, don't forget that BBC Radio 3 is broadcasting every single part of this pre-service concert. So by all means, if you want to follow every note of the music, well, Radio 3 and our colleagues there will be offering you that. But why don't we just enjoy some of this for the next few minutes?
The music from Westminster Abbey. We can combine it with the shots here, our first sight today on Coronation Day of His Majesty King Charles III and the Queen Consort, and they are travelling in the State Bentley, which was built in honour of the Queen's first 50 years on the throne, and there was input from the Duke of Edinburgh, the late Duke of Edinburgh, the late Queen, and Her Majesty's head chauffeur, so that this car could provide maximum visual impact for the crowds, and it is the first opportunity for them to see the King, albeit fleetingly. He had an impromptu walkabout yesterday with the Prince and Princess of Wales and was in very good spirits, but this first movement, just low-key, the State Bentley making its way from Clarence House to Buckingham Palace, where the King and Queen will change into their full ceremonial robes, and the next time that we see them, they will be in the Diamond Jubilee state coach, and they will be leaving Buckingham Palace at 10:20.
Thanks, Claire. Well as all the bunting and celebrations and the flags and the music, at the very heart of today is a religious service. And Hugh Edwards visited Westminster Abbey to meet the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, the man who, later this morning, will crown King Charles III.
I'm just struck, Archbishop, by the fact that it's 70 years since this magical place hosted a coronation. But the world has changed a lot in 70 years. So I'm wondering, what was your challenge in crafting a service and a ceremony that reflects those changes?
The biggest challenge was that it doesn't look like Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, you know, lots of strange things going on, but that it represents Britain as it is today and gathers collective hopes for the future while holding on to the tradition of the past. That was the challenge.
We're in what we call the Coronation Theatre. We're going to start over here with the chairs of estate, and there'll be a moment at the start of the ceremony where the King and Queen will be here, and they'll be approached by a young person.
Yes.
To underline a theme. What is that?
The theme of this whole process of the coronation is service, service in love. It's about the King receives all this authority in order to be a blessing and a servant to the people.
I'm bound to say that all eyes, certainly at quite a big point, will be focused on this chair, this ancient chair, the coronation chair of St. Edward, which is not in the kind of condition that you'd expect a throne to be in, is it?
No, it's absolutely amazing.
But, and it's a very big but, underneath the seat, we have the stone, the stone of Scone.
The stone of destiny. This was used for the enthroning of Scottish kings before, I think it was Edward I, nicked it, basically. It went back to Scotland quite rightly in 1996.
That's right.
With the promise it could come for the coronation. And, of course, it'll go back to Scotland afterwards.
This is something we can see.
Yes.
But there is a very important element in this service and ceremony that you will see because you are performing the anointing with holy oil. But nobody else will see it. There'll be a screen, won't there, built around this chair. Why is that shielded from public gaze?
The anointing is the most sacred moment, and it's between the King and God. It represents the gift of the Holy Spirit of God, equipping this very Christian king of deep faith to bear the burden of the crown.
You will be placing that crown on the king's head.
I will.
And you have to do it with great care.
I have to do it with great care.
How much practice or rehearsal is there before the event itself? A lot.
There's a lot of practice. We obtained a replica of the crown, and I've been crowning anything that stood still long enough just to get this right. I will also be practicing with the real thing and memorizing which jewels are on which side.
I'll leave that to you. But of course, let's not forget, Archbishop, you're not just crowning one person. You're crowning a king and queen.
Absolutely.
Sophie, and because the two thrones here remind us of that. And I'm bound to ask you on a maybe a more personal level, you are the person entrusted to crown king and queen. How have you approached this ceremony?
Lots of prayer, lots of practice. I trust in the God who calls each one of us, called me, who calls the king and queen, that in this beautiful Christian service, God will touch us and lead us.
Archbishop, I speak on behalf of everyone watching. I know this. Good luck, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much, Hugh.
Thank you very much. From the silence of a quiet abbey just a couple of days ago, we are now here on Coronation Day with a congregation of over 2,000 people enjoying the music of the Monteverdi Choir and the English Baroque soloists conducted by Sir John Eliot Gardner. And just a reminder that if you want a guide as to the order of service, which will be coming up, well then we are providing a QR code which will appear on your screen, and you'll be able to use that QR code to download the order of service, or indeed you can visit bbc.co.uk/coronation service. Now, there's Joan Armour Trading, one of many representatives of the Prince's Trust today. She's here, of course, as a distinguished singer-songwriter, but she has a very long-standing relationship with the Prince's Trust and has worked extensively with the Prince of Wales as he was. Katy Perry, in the same way, representing part of the community and will be taking part in the concert at Windsor Castle tomorrow night. There you have former Senator John Kerry, who worked so hard in terms of Ireland, but also, of course, now a great advocate of action for against global warming and for taking very stern steps against climate change. And Sir Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister. There we have opposition parties, the leader of the opposition there, Sir Keir Starmer for Labour, and Sir Ed Davey for the Liberal Democrats, with Baroness Smith just there on the right, the Labour leader in the Lords. And of course we've got other representatives of the Prince's Trust. Oswald Boateng, the fashion designer and tailor, is here as well, and they are all people who have been helping younger people, especially from disadvantaged backgrounds, to shine in their own professions. Fan Jones there of the Stereophonics. The next piece by Sir John Eliot Gardner and his musicians by Bruckner.
beautifully disciplined singing and playing under the direction of Sir John Eliot Gardiner, with the congregation in the nave beyond the organ screen showing their appreciation. The King is a very strong supporter of the work of Sir John and his particular specialist approach to music of ancient times, and particularly Baroque music. So that's a wonderful opening to this few hours of world-class music before the coronation service gets underway. And a quick reminder once again, as the applause carries on, that all of the music is available without any of our interviews with guests or commentary on Radio 3, on BBC Radio 3 right now. So if you're wanting to follow all of the music uninterrupted, with Sir John Eliot Gardiner, who's just finished his section, and Sir Antonio Pappano, who will succeed him as the conductor, and with the orchestra in a short while, you can do that. Well, someone's having a good time. Anton Deck, the ITV duo, taking their seats in the congregation, and they are, of course, ambassadors for the Prince's Trust, as well as so many of the prominent individuals in the congregation are, having a good look around, spotting who else is there, because there are lots of familiar faces to spot. And they include from Australia Nick Cave, the singer, who's a recipient of one of the Australian awards. They are represented in the processions today. Familiar face to many of us, Dame Tanny Gray-Thompson, Baroness Gray-Thompson now, the Paralympian champion, and now, of course, a very prominent and energetic fighter for equality and diversity in sport and elsewhere. Stephen Fry, glasses on, having a look at the order of service in some detail, just tucked in there at the back of one of the sections in the congregation. Someone who knows the King very well. And in this sector of the congregation, we have faith leaders and leaders of the communities belonging to Christian churches, and there we can see two former Archbishops of Canterbury, George Carey on the left and Rowan Williams, with John Sentamu, the former Archbishop of York, and of course Archbishop Angelos and other faith leaders. They'll be joined a little later as well by the Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mervis, who is part of one of the processions. He will be one of those taking part today, because as we look at the gathering of leaders of Christian faith and other faiths, we are reminded of the fact that the King, of course, has gone out of his way to say that he will defend people of all faiths and people of no faith, respecting the freedom of the individual. Lionel Richie, very familiar face, who will be singing in the concert in Windsor tomorrow, but he is a global ambassador for the Prince's Trust. There we have a glimpse of the very fine organ at Westminster Abbey, built by Harrison and Harrison of Durham back in 1937 for the coronation of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, replacing an earlier instrument from 1848. It really is one of the finest organs in the world, and it'll be heard to great effect in this service today, being played at the moment by the assistant organist, Matthew Yorish, and during the service, a little before the service, will be played by Peter Holder, who is the sub-organist of Westminster Abbey. Very fine organists who will be making sure that the singing is disciplined and that it'll all be very well supported. So the congregation enjoying the music and really just looking ahead now to some of the processions beginning. And talking of processions, let's go outside again and join Claire.
Hugh, thank you. The crowds that are gathered along the Mall and Whitehall have been hearing already the marching bands, and you saw the drum major leading the corps of drums. And I'm delighted to say that alongside me this morning will be Brigadier Greville Bibby, CBE, former regimental lieutenant colonel of the Coldstream Guards. And Greville, what we will see over the course of both the King's procession and the Coronation procession is the most outstanding display of military marching. And there is a real skill to this. And why is the music important? Because that's not just for entertainment purposes.
No, it's not, Claire. You can see the choral drums there, and they are an integral part of the fighting battalion. So they're musicians and soldiers, and you can see the drawstrings below their drum. The reason they have those is because as they go into battle and lead the men into battle, they can put the drums on their backs and take up with the fighting.
Fascinating information and also a great sound outside as well as inside the Abbey.
So high above the nave in the organ loft, we have the Coronation Orchestra, which is to be conducted by Sir Antonio Pappano. There he is, the music director of the Royal Opera House. They'll start with Brighter Visions Shine Afar, new work by the composer Judith Weir. Beautiful start with Sir Antonio Pappano there. And all the while, of course, people joining the congregation, heads of state, representatives of other countries. There'll be representatives of Commonwealth countries joining us a little later on. And of course, we're still being joined by faith leaders from around the world. So as they're taking their place, let's rejoin Sir Antonio and a great work from The Planets by Gustav Holst.
Meanwhile, at Wellington Barracks, we have the Tri-Service Guard of Honour, who are formed up. Their colours will shortly be marched on, commanded by Major Andy Dickinson of the Coldstream Guards. And we will shortly hear the national anthem. Shortly we will see the Tri-Service Guard of Honour march towards the Queen Victoria Memorial in front of Buckingham Palace. Greville, I wanted to ask you about the significance of the regimental colours.
Yes, Claire, I mean, they're hugely significant. They essentially embody the spirit of the regiment or the ship. They are the rallying point on the battlefield. In the days before we had radios, we could actually talk to each other on the battlefield. We needed something that we could follow, and everyone would follow their colours. And if you lost your colours, that normally meant the defeat of the regiment. Very, very significant.
We have all of the services represented within the Guard of Honour.
We do, and we've got the three colours, very unusual to have a Tri-Service Guard of Honour. We've got the Royal Navy with their King's colour, carried by Lieutenant Christopher Rees-Lloyd. And then you've got the King's colour of the King's Colour Squadron RAF, with Flight Lieutenant Robert Cutler carrying that. And then the state colour, there's the state colour of the Coldstream Guards. It's absolutely vast. It's about the size of a king-size double duvet, and it's extremely heavy. And that's being carried by Lieutenant Jolyon Reid, who would have been doing his weights in the gym, I should think.
And all of the colours newly produced because of the new cipher. We had a very good shot of it there. So the CR3, the new cipher for King Charles III.
Indeed, and His Majesty presented some new colours just last week, which we're going to see on parade today. Look at that, it's absolutely vast. It's really, really heavy. Very, very difficult when you're saluting and you have to lower it.
The RAF well represented and close to the King's heart, as indeed is the Royal Navy. He served in both.
There's the King's Colour Squadron, the ceremonial squadron of the Royal Air Force. Very, very smart.
And while the Guard of Honour take their place, we will head back to Westminster Abbey.
Welsh composer Carl Jenkins, very pleased with the rendition of Trossachgarrig, his version of the Welsh folk tune, with Alice Hughes, the royal harpist, the post that the King has recreated, really. And now, moving on to a work by Sarah Class.
And lead us through the desert by your light. You make your prophets word a burning coal, and turn the lonely temple embedded light. You keep your silence in the desert blaze, and speak your secrets in the lightning storm. You hide the sun's face like a candle flame, and send a star to keep a stable warm, and feed our hearts with sacred fire, the blessing of the rosebud and the briar. Come fill our hearts tonight with sacred fire, with sacred fire, with sacred fire. Your love can make the hearts within us burn, and let that firelight reveal our shame. You call the broken fellowship to feast, and teach us to forgive in tongues of flame. Your wisdom is the sunlight and the snow. Your beauty is the rosebud and the briar. Use us to know the shadow and the light, and fill our hearts today with sacred fire, and fill our hearts with sacred fire, the blessing of the rosebud and the briar. Come fill our hearts tonight with sacred fire, sacred
Wonderful, the South African soprano Pretty Yende singing Sacred Fire. That's a new work that was commissioned for today from the classical and film composer Sarah Klaas, who clearly enjoyed Pretty Yende's rendition of that lovely, lovely work. This will stir the soul. Antonio and the Coronation Orchestra, drawn from 8 orchestras of which the Prince of Wales, as he was patron. Very fine musicians. Wharton's Crown Imperial, unveiled in 1937, the coronation of George VI. Making his way across Parliament Square on a rather rainy day now is Lord McFall, John McFall, the Lord Speaker, with Black Rod on his left, the officer who guards access to parts of the Palace of Westminster and security in the House of Lords, making their way across to the Great West Door of Westminster Abbey, and they will be followed within a few minutes, I reckon, by the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and the Speaker's chaplain. So the two Speakers' processions underway, and Lord McFall smiling broadly as he arrives for this coronation service. Applause in the Abbey for that very rousing rendition of Walton's Crown Imperial. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, being led by the Sergeant-at-Arms with the mace, and the Speaker's chaplain also in the procession, making their way into the Abbey for this coronation service and joining the Lord Speaker as they are there as symbols of parliamentary sovereignty and independence. So with that element of procession going on in front of the Abbey, let's join Claire once again for the other processions happening.
Yes, lots of action outside as well, Hugh, and that light drizzle we had has just eased off, and you see the magnificent sight there of the drum horses leading the way. Now, this is a key individual because this is Major General Chris Geeker. He's commander of the Household Division, and he will move ahead of the procession. He will prove the route. But Apollo and Atlas, those two drum horses being ridden by the drummers, you see the reins attached to their feet, so they do the steering with their feet. And Apollo for the Blues and Royals, particularly interesting because he was actually talent spotted by Her Majesty the Queen Consort. She was on a cart ride in Pembrokeshire, and she thought, do you know, that's a lovely horse, could do a very good job as a drum horse. And the Household Cavalry gleaming here, Greville, and this is a really important part of the procession and indeed the power, as it were, of the British Army.
It most certainly is, Claire. And there we have the Blues and Royals of the first two sections of the procession, taking their positions before His Majesty comes on to parade. And it's very interesting seeing Chris Geeker there, flanked by his principal staff officers on their horses. And those are the gentlemen who've spent the last 6 or 7 months preparing for this parade. There he is, watching.
With swan feathers in that bicorn hat.
If you say so, Claire.
They are. Blues and Royals here, and all of these horses trained for ceremonial work and therefore very used to loud noises, very used to music, and they've got a fair amount of stamina as well. They've got a long day ahead of them, as indeed have all of those on their feet, because we have 1,600 streetliners in position, and they are there to frame the route and to provide essential security. And down at Whitehall we find the RAF and a member there of the Royal New Zealand Air Force. And the RAF is the oldest independent air force. The Royal Marines we find outside Westminster Abbey, and they are widely acknowledged as one of the world's elite fighting forces, especially in extreme climates. And we have the uniformed civilian services, so members of the police force, the fire brigade, St John Ambulance, British Red Cross as well, and they are streetlining on Whitehall, there to frame the route but also to provide essential security.
And of course, Claire, this isn't their day job. These men and women who are streetlining, this is something very few of them will have ever done before.
Standing at exact 5-pace intervals.
They are.
everyone appreciating the gentle undulations of Vaughan Williams's Fantasia on green sleeves. We've had new members of the congregation join us. President Macron of France and his wife have joined the congregation here, shaking hands with some of the other heads of state, and President of Germany, President of Italy, among those who've joined the congregation too. The political contingent also represented here by Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and there on the left is Charles Michel, who is the President of the European Council. The President of the European Parliament is also due to be here, so a very strong contingent from the institutions of the European Union. And just at the back there, with the blue ribbon, is Jill Biden, with her granddaughter Finnegan, who's just on the left, with the yellow addition to her hair. And of course, they are here representing the US President Joe Biden. The faith leaders, the ecumenical leaders, now making their way in, led by the Verger Ben Sherwood, and they are representing a wide range of faith communities: the Baha'i community, Jain community, Zoroastrian trust funds of Europe, London Buddhist Vihara. And we have Lord Singh there of Wimbledon, who's director of Network of the Sikh organizations. The Shia Muslim community and the Sunni Muslim communities also represented. And just at the rear there, we can just spot Sir Ephraim Mervis, who's the Chief Rabbi of Great Britain and the United Hebrew Congregations of the Commonwealth. Churches of Wales represented by the Archbishop of Wales there and the Archbishop of Cardiff. Churches of Scotland, including the Right Reverend Dr. Ian Greenshields, who's moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, will be presenting a new Bible to the King during the ceremony of coronation. And at the rear there we have Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the leader of Roman Catholics in England and Wales, and His Eminence Archbishop Nikitas, the Greek Orthodox leader in the UK. Making their way beyond the organ screen into the choir itself. So this procession of faith and ecumenical leaders representing all branches of faith and different branches, of course, of the Christian churches. More political leaders arriving. We have Humza Yousaf, who is the First Minister of Scotland, took over from Nicola Sturgeon just a few weeks ago. He is here with his wife, and they're being led to their seats, which will also be in the choir as one of the leaders of the devolved nations. And at the Great West Door, the Dean, the Archbishop of Canterbury, greeting Mark Drakeford, who is the First Minister of Wales. And he's taking his place too as the leader of one of the devolved nations. Should point out, of course, that Northern Ireland is in a rather hybrid situation at the moment, given that the Stormont Assembly is not sitting, and therefore there is no one formally filling the role of First Minister there. Still raining a little outside the Abbey because the umbrellas are there, and we're going to see leaders of communities certainly across London too, including the Lord Mayor of London. We've seen Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, the elected Mayor of London, arrive earlier, but we have the Lord Mayor of Westminster and the Lord Mayor of London both arriving here for the coronation service. Their presence a very regular thing at events of state and royal events at the Abbey and at St. Paul's Cathedral. Lord Mayor of London, Nicholas Lyons. Making sure that all is in order. Representatives of the Foot Guards regiments will be taking part a little later in this service, because they'll be bringing into the Coronation Theatre the screens that will be used to shield the St Edward's chair, so that the anointing of the King is not visible to the general public. Because as the Archbishop explained to me in that film a short while ago, it's an intensely personal moment between the monarch and his God. And that's not a moment that they want the cameras to be focusing on. And there you have a good sense of the geography of the Abbey. Just the Coronation Theatre there with the two throne chairs. And then the choir pews leading down to that opening which goes under the organ loft, and where the orchestra and Sir Antonio Pappano are currently performing, and then into the nave. And right at the end, the Great West Door, where the Dean of Westminster and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, are greeting the guests as they arrive. A quick reminder that if you'd like to see details of the order of service, well then you can scan the QR code, which we'll put on the screen for you. If you scan that, you can download the order of service and follow it. Or you can visit bbc.co.uk/coronation service to see what is planned and to add to your enjoyment about the various elements of the service itself, because as I was explaining to you earlier, it's not straightforward in the sense that there are very complex patterns, very involved and ancient stages to the ceremony, rites, if you like, of coronation, going back to the Middle Ages and beyond that, back 1,000 years. Going back to the days of William the Conqueror in 1066, because the remarkable thing about being here is that we have to remind ourselves that there's been a place of worship on this spot for over 1,000 years. At the heart of the Abbey's music, of course, we mentioned the organ earlier, but the glorious programme of music overseen by the organist and master of choristers, who was appointed not so long ago, so a very big task for Andrew Netzinger, who works closely, of course, with the organists here. He today will be conducting the choirs down in the choir, and they'll feature the combined voices of the choir of Westminster Abbey, the choir of His Majesty's Chapel Royal. They will be joining us very shortly. The choir of girl choristers from Truro Cathedral, because clearly there was a decision made that this could not be a coronation where there were exclusively male voices in the choir. So girl choristers from Truro Cathedral and the Methodist College Belfast, and the singers of the Monteverdi Choir. And by the way, a little later, the Ascension Choir will be the first gospel choir to sing at a coronation. Just entering the Abbey now is Councillor Hamza Tautzaleh, who's the Lord Mayor of Westminster, and by the way, the youngest person ever elected to the role. He was elected at the age of 22, and he's the first Muslim to hold the position. So he, in many ways, personifies what the King and Queen were determined to do with this congregation today, which is to show the United Kingdom as it is today in 2023. It had to be recognisably different to the Britain of 1953, because of course we live in a very different world. There will be reminders of past events, and indeed some of them very poignant. For example, at one point a Byzantine chant ensemble will be singing the sound of Greek Orthodox music in the service, and that will be in memory of the King's father, the late Duke of Edinburgh. So there will be elements which have been carefully thought out and woven into the fabric of the service and the ceremony itself. remarkable to think that when we look at this sublime building, much of it was in place in the Middle Ages. And when you stop and pause and look around you and look above you, certainly, you wonder how it was all done back in the 13th century and then added to later, a few centuries later. The master of the fabric, as the person was known in charge of the building at one stage, was Sir Christopher Wren, but there were other distinguished names involved as well. Much of the stained glass, which people often remark on, is more modern. There's very little medieval stained glass left, just fragments of it, because over the years things have been changed and indeed things have been damaged along the way, but the sublime elegance of the building speaks for itself. The soaring nave, and outside these enormous flying buttresses, keeping everything together, propping up the immense force of these walls. And everywhere, of course, you have the rich combination of colours, added to today by the carpet that's been laid, the bright blue carpet with its royal overtones, and of course the gold carpet in the Coronation Theatre itself. The Grenadier Guards standing to attention, waiting patiently, because they are, of course, Foot Guards Regiment with a very close bond to the monarch. We're talking about the King's Company, and there's the King's Company colour. The Royal Standard of the Grenadier Guards, carried only when the regiment is employed on ceremonial duties in the presence of His Majesty. Now, the colour is the personal gift of the sovereign, and it's presented only once in each reign, and then it is laid at the feet of the sovereigns who have passed when that time comes. Second Lieutenant Rupert Elmhurst is given the honour and the privilege of carrying the King's Company colour today. Outside the Abbey, we've already seen the faith leaders and leaders of Christian churches arriving. We are expecting a group of former Prime Ministers and their partners arriving now. And again, the umbrellas are out in force. And the Dean and the Archbishop will be ready to greet. There's Gordon Brown and his wife Sarah, Tony Blair and Cherie Blair. Sir John Major. We understand that Dame Norma Major was meant to be here today but is unwell, so she's unable to attend. So Sir John is making his way in, chatting to the Blairs. And then we see David and Samantha Cameron too, joining the group of former Prime Ministers who go in, all of whom, of course, know the King very well because they've had dealings with him over decades. All the Prime Ministers describe their audiences with Her Majesty the Queen. Well, of course, those audiences now continue with the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who we'll see a little later on, with King Charles III. And the purpose of the audience with the Prime Minister, of course, is to share confidentially what is going on, to pass on the intelligence about who's performing well and not so well, which policies are working and not working, what problems have arisen, problems around international affairs and maybe to do with Commonwealth affairs as well. Justin Welby welcoming Gordon and Sarah Brown, and the Dean himself, who's wearing today, well, he's wearing the robe that was worn by his predecessor back in 1953. And this is a common theme today because the King will be wearing robes and other items of regalia and clothing that have been used before. So there's recycling going on, which is entirely in line with the King's commitment to green policy and practice. Theresa May and her husband Philip, followed by Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie, and then Prime Minister for a very brief period, Liz Truss, with her husband Hugh O'Leary. So that completes the group of former Prime Ministers who've arrived. There will be a procession of leaders from the Commonwealth realms, which will include the United Kingdom, of course, and the representatives there will be Rishi Sunak and his wife. The orchestra now unveiling for the first time Coronation March, written especially for today by Patrick Doyle, as representatives of the Commonwealth realms are preparing to come into the Abbey. Stepping past the memorial stone for Sir Winston Churchill, whose grandson, by the way, Nicholas Holmes, is in the congregation today. And then the Commonwealth realms being led by Antigua and Barbuda. They're in alphabetical order. And then, of course, Australia, the familiar flag. Governor-General David Hurley, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, followed by the Bahamas and then Belize. And just coming through the Great West Door, the bold flag of Canada, Governor-General Mary Simon, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife arriving. Followed by Grenada, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, and then Jamaica. Governor-General Patrick Allen, Prime Minister Andrew Holness representing Jamaica. New Zealand, Dame Cindy Kiro and Prime Minister Chris Hipkins representing the indigenous heritage as well of New Zealand. Papua New Guinea, more of the Commonwealth realms, all of them coming partly out of respect, of course, for Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose determination to hold the Commonwealth together was unshakable, and that determination shared by King Charles III, St. Christopher and Nevis and St. Lucia, St. Vincent, the Solomon Islands, and then Tuvalu, and the United Kingdom. Cadet Warrant Officer Elliot Tyson Lee with the Union Standard, and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Akshata Murthy, his wife.